Hey friends, welcome back to the kitchen. We have not put our new canner away since we've unboxed it and had it out on the counter. It's so convenient that I've just continued on doing some canning that I need to get done. A little bit of maintenance canning for the root cellar. So we'll show you what we're going to do. Alright, thus far we've only showed you the hot water bath canning, which is very convenient with this machine. I didn't think I was going to really use it much for that because hot water bath canning is so easy, but this canner makes it even easier. But today we're going to do the first pressure canning with this unit, and we're going to start off with the absolute easiest thing you can pressure can. We use a lot of beans for different recipes for making our chili beans. We can make refried beans with them. We can do everything with them. And they're really convenient because they're already cooked. So that's the advantage of canning dry beans. So it could not get any simpler, folks. Get yourself a pint jar. We have the regular mouth pint jar. Put a half a cup of dry beans, and then fill to your shoulder of your jar, that little wide spot there underneath your lid, with cold tap water. Put your lid on, screw the cap on. The nice thing about pressure canning is you don't have to sterilize your lids. You don't have to do any of that because you're cooking at such a high temperature and high pressure and for such a long time that everything becomes sterilized. So as long as it's clean, you don't have to go to the crazy steps of sterilizing everything. So we put our lids on these jars and we're going to throw them in the canner. We filled our canner to the fill line, which is I believe about 3 quarts. And that's the amount of water you need to pressure can. And you want to do this before you put your jars in, because once you get your jars in, it changes the level. All right, we got our jars in the canner. And because we've packed these cold, we don't need to do some of the processes like warm the jars and other things like that. So we're going to kind of skip a couple steps. So we'll put the lid on. You always want to line the install remove line up with that notch there, or that mark on the canner. Now we're in the locked mode, and we're going to put our pressure sensor down. We're going to lock that, but we're going to leave the regulator off because we're actually going to do the jar warming mode, but we're going to roll right on into the canning mode. So down here we're on pressure can. So we're going to select that. Then it's going to have you do the minutes. So we'll turn the knob to 75 minutes, which in the book that came with this canner, they have a recipe for dry beans, and it said 75 minutes. I've done from an hour all the way to 90 minutes sometimes. So then we'll press that button. It'll say insert jars, and we've already done that. So we hit the little button there and it goes into the warming mode, like it's going to warm the jars. So once the thing beeps, we'll come back and we'll show you what to do next. Now I put our filled jars in there for the warm mode because I don't want to put cold jars into the canner after the warming cycle has completed. So I don't want to shock the jars, and it won't hurt those filled jars to be in there during the warming mode. So the warming cycle is done. It says now to fill jars, and we've already done that. So we're going to go ahead and just press the arrow button, and now it's going to heat. All right, we're preparing for our next batch while the canner's going. I've got some of our Swedish brown beans that I've measured into some jars. And anytime I have some leftover of any kind of beans, I'll mix them together. So this is baby limas, some pinto beans, and some of our Swedish brown beans, kind of a 3-bean medley. And I'm going to make up some of these and cook these. Now, a good tip, I buy this Texmati rice because I really like it, because I don't like mushy rice that all sticks together. There are certain applications for it, but if we're just eating like a shrimp dish over rice or a stir fry, I love this Texmati rice because it stays individual grains after you cook it. But I save the canisters when I'm done because they're very good for saving dry beans. So we use these a lot. I got several down in the root cellar with our dry beans in them. I'm also going to can some red beans because when I make red beans and rice, it's really handy to have the beans already cooked. And I use the Texmati rice for the red beans and rice too. Of course, we're not going to can that. That's a dish that we make. But having the beans on hand to make that makes it a really quick dish. The rice cooks in about 20 minutes. And so 20 minutes, you got some red beans and rice. So we're going to keep moving. We can even put the water in these jars because it doesn't hurt anything if the beans start to expand. They're already in the jars. They're going to do that anyway. So we can go ahead and fill all this stuff up and get it ready to go in the canner. Now, nearly all of your pressure canning bean recipes call for you to rehydrate the beans before you fill your jars and start the process. That's because they don't want you to overfill your jars, because once the beans start expanding, you can easily overfill your jars. But, nice as I am, I've already figured out the amounts for you through trial and error, and a half a cup of dry beans fits in a pint jar. Now I'm assuming 1 cup in a quart jar would work, but I've never done that. Give it a shot and let me know. But you can do that. They will rehydrate in the jar, they'll cook in the jar, they'll do everything in the jar. It works out just fine. So after the warming phase, the canner goes into vent mode without any input from you. It does that automatically. And what that's doing is it's venting the air out of the canner to where it's completely filled with steam and there's no air pockets in there. And you'll see steam coming out of this regulator hole. And then in that phase, once it's ready, we'll put the regulator on, but we'll show you how that works. The venting phase takes 10 minutes and it counts down. And when it's done, it starts beeping, and you can see it says put regulator on. So it says to do it with a hot pad, but I'm just going to pop this baby on there. And then it says to make sure it's in the canning position, which is right here. So once we do that, we press that button, and then it lists our 75 minutes. And once this comes up to pressure, it'll start counting down all on its own. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention to you that I just learned is this is the pointer on your regulator. If when you put it back down, the pointer is anywhere in this area, it only rotates 180 degrees. So you got to pull it back off, turn it around, put it back down, and then it'll rotate to the positions here. It's got 2 vent positions, and then the can position is directly forward. Now, another thing I found while I was filling my other jars, I have a non-canning jar that made it into my inventory. And I noticed that because it's lighter weight. Just like anything else, manufacturers have cut down on the amount of glass they used in their jars for stuff that you buy at the store. And they're not heavy enough to pressure can, and nobody recommends that you use these. Now, some people will keep these for doing like refrigerator pickles and stuff like that, but I don't want to take the chance that this will find its way back into my canning inventory again, because I'll just use a canning jar for pickles and stuff like that in the fridge. So this one's going to go bye-bye. We've got all of our rest of our jars packed, and there's enough for exactly 2 more batches, which is 16, 8 and 8. We've got 3 jars of our Swedish brown beans, 3 jars of red beans, and 10 jars of the bean medley. Isn't that gorgeous? It's going to be really nice. So when you put these lids on when you're pressure canning, you just want to snug them. You don't want to be wrenching those things down, because those jars are going to actually boil in the canner and they're going to vent out just a little bit. So don't go crazy with those. Now, dry beans are probably the most inexpensive things that you can can. You can buy them in bulk at the store in the big bulk bin, and they're real cheap. They're really good to keep on hand because those dry beans store forever in an airtight container. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show you while I was over here loading these jars, I don't have to babysit this thing. It just does everything on its own. So I just can't explain to you enough what a game changer that is when you can walk away and do other things. Normally you'd be here on the stove messing around with the temperature and coming back every 5 minutes looking at the pressure. It's just not an easy thing to do. It's not crazy hard where you can't do it, but this canner just takes all the work out of it. Now, if you were hot packing, you wouldn't want to do any of this ahead of time, because when you hot pack, you want to hot pack your jars right before you put them in the canner, because you don't want your food sitting around here on the counter cooling off. One, if it gets below a certain temperature, it'll start probably developing bacteria even early on. And two, it'll take your canner that much longer to heat up. So this is not for hot packing. Now, once the canner builds pressure, the steam vent closes, and then once it pops up, you can no longer open your lid. So that is a safety mechanism that it has. When it's all done and the pressure bleeds off, that will fall back down to where you can open the lid again. But it's building pressure now, and then once it builds, that timer will start counting down. The cooker is in its cool down mode now. It takes about an hour and a half or so, cools down on its own, which is good. You don't want to bleed the pressure off quickly, because then you lose liquid from inside the jar. You can see our little nub here is still sticking up. So when it's ready, that'll fall back down once we lose pressure. And then this thing will say done, and then all you got to do is turn the canner off. Open your vent to make sure there's no pressure left in there, and then this thing will be down. You can open this, and then that big hole in the lid will be open, and you can unload everything out of your canner. You can see we're on our last batch of the day. We've got 2 batches done before this. Almost done. The last part of the cool down period, the timer will start again and count down from 10 minutes. We're down to 3 minutes, and our pressure relief just popped down. So 2 more minutes, this thing will be done. We can shut her down, open our vent, and take the lid off. All right, we're all done. Just press hold our off button. Everything goes off. Open our vent. No pressure. Open that. No pressure coming out of that lid. So let's take our lid off. Here we go. You can see our beans are still boiling in the jars. So now we'll lift all these out. So we are all done for the day. We've got 8 jars of pinto beans. We've got 10 jars of our bean medley. You can hear the can starting to seal. We have 3 jars of our brown beans and 3 jars of our red beans. So we literally been doing this all day today. You can tell it's dark outside right now. And because we haven't had to sit here in the kitchen all day and pay attention and babysit a canner, a pressure canner, we were able to basically go on about our usual business all day. I worked out in the garden. I made lunch, dinner, or Kelly made lunch. We washed dishes, cleaned the kitchen. Kelly cleaned the house. I drove to town. We did all that, which I would not be able to do with a standard pressure canner. So amazing. We're going to get so much use out of this. And you can see it's kind of a slow process, so it's a good thing that we actually bought 2 of these, so we could basically double what we did today in one day. So super neat. Hope you guys enjoyed our little tutorial video here today. Gonna love this thing. So if you got any questions or comments, please put them below. If not, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. Take a look at our videos up here. Catch you on the next one.